Okay. So, section we're going to be covering right now is Dawah mode. So, inshallah, at this point, you've gone through the previous sessions. We've already discussed the characteristics of a da'i, the principles of how to give dawah. So, we already know the mindset by which you should approach dawah in and of itself, and also how to think, how the other person is going to respond. We've also been through the arguments themselves, so the content in what you're going to say. So Dawah mode is all about how do you actually now have that conversation with an individual, inshallah. So, Bismillah. Alhamdulillah, Jazakallah khair. Right, okay. So the question is, should we answer all questions? So, for example, if somebody asks you a question of, why do you guys pray? Why do you guys, why do you guys fast in the month of Ramadan? Can you, have a sneaky, can you go hide in the closet and have a cheeky snack or something like that? Why do you guys pray? Why can't you guys eat pork and whatever have you? And it's very tempting to try and answer these questions by giving some degree of an explanation. Well, the answer for this is that, and the ruling for this is this, and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said that, and blah 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 blah. So the question is that an effective strategy? Should that be what we're doing? Is that how we should be engaging with all of these questions? And I, as well as others, so not just me and myself, would argue that no, it's not an effective strategy. The reason why I've got it listed there is because every single question begets another question. From one question, you'll get another question, and ultimately, there's going to be no end to questions. People are just going to ask a question about this, going to ask a question about that, going to ask a question about this. And if you start dealing with every single one thing individually, basically there's no end to questions, because there's no end to potential circumstances and individual circumstances that could arise, or differences in interpretations and whatever have you. And again, you also have your differences in worldview that's going to prevent coming through to meaningful conclusions. So, you might say, why can't you do X, Y, and Z? Well, because, from our background, we consider this to be, okay, so why do women have to cover their hair? Oh, well, because why do the men? Because women's hair has different properties and qualities to the man. Well, I don't agree with that. Blah 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 blah. It should be equal on both sides and whatever have you. You're going to have differences in worldview. By the way, they say that, but they don't actually practice it, right? So, but the point here is, even in the course of discussion, you're going to have differences in worldview. How the worldview is perceived, that's going to prevent an individual, or going to prevent the person that you're talking to see the conclusion that you're trying to portray. So recall all the way back to the second session, where we discussed changing the worldviews, the different colored glasses. If you're wearing red glasses and they're wearing blue glasses, there's nothing much that you can say to them to convince them of what your worldview looks like, except to get them to try your glasses on. So again, just arbitrary talking and explanations in and of themselves is not going to work all the way. And also, the problem with that is that's going to then encourage debate. It's going to encourage argumentation. Not like heated argument, but you're going to have this back and forth as to whether that worldview is valid or not. And then it's a case of that. Well, how are you going to, what's the crux on which you're gonna present your point forward? How are you going to argue one way better than another? And ultimately, even if you manage to explain to a person how much your worldview makes sense, ultimately they're going to say, well, okay, fine, that one individual point, yep, that makes sense, and they might just walk away, never having thought about any of the other bigger issues, and ultimately never having been called to Islam. So you've just spent some time talking to this person, convincing them about this one singular aspect of Islamic principles, which they may agree with you. They may see the sense in it. They may even compartmentalize and say, well, okay, that's fine for you in the Middle East, but here it's not okay. But ultimately, they haven't come anywhere close. They haven't come closer towards Islam. You haven't left them with that seed for them to think about. So ultimately, what was the point? And the technique of the Anbiya and Rasulullah wasn't to answer every single question directly, but again, was to plant the seed. So, for example, when someone came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and asked him, "Assalamu alaikum, Abi, when is the hour?" Rather than explaining to him, well, it's going to be here, there, and then, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked him, "What have you done to prepare for it?" That's the bigger question. Right? Forget when it is. What have you done to prepare for it? So it's not a question of having to answer every single one thing. You give the person the answer that they need, which is not necessarily the answer that they want, and there's an important distinction that you have to recognize. And also, here's the other problem as well. It requires a lot of knowledge. You have to have a wide range of knowledge on a lot of different topics to be able to articulate the answers effectively. And particularly for people who are starting out in Dawah, which presumably many, would be if you're going through this material right now. That's not going to be your situation. So again, it's something that I would not advise to do. I would not advise to to try and answer every single question. There needs to be some kind of a better way. And of course, this is also an ineffective strategy as well. People very, very rarely are brought forth to Islam because they had 1,000,001 questions answered. Usually, people will come towards Islam because of a very fundamental crux that got to the heart of their identity, or the heart of their being, the core of their existence from what they defined it to be, or what they perceived it to be, and something really, there was a particular thing that really touched them, and that's what actually called them to Islam. Not the case of, I had I had 1,000,001 questions answered, so yallah, I just said Bismillah. It doesn't work like that. That's not real. It doesn't happen like that. So the better strategy is to call people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this was the instructions that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave to Mu'adh ibn Jabal when he went to Yemen, which is that you're going to call to people who are from the book, so Christians or Jews. And the first thing that you should call them to is the testimony that none has the right to be worshipped except Allah. Basically, La ilaha illallah. So essentially, what you want to be doing, this is how you change the glasses of someone, right? You convince them. The answer to all questions is essentially basically being that, look, understand the world from our perspective, that if you believe that there is a creator, if you accept the rational, self-evident, truth that there is a divine reality that created us, and he sent us a message and guidance and guides and messengers and prophets to tell us how to live and whatever have you, and this is what they taught us, then surely it makes sense that what they came with must be better than anything else that man themselves have come up with, because we've seen from time and time and time again that whenever man tries to govern themselves, that it always fails at some point, or always goes towards corruption. Regardless of the good intentions it may have started with, there is always some inherent defect or weakness in it that ultimately leads to its demise. So the reason why I do X, Y, or Z is ultimately because I believe in a creator that created us for a purpose. I believe in the message of the Quran because it's divine revelation. It can't be anything else. It cannot be characterized as anything else. And I believe in the messengership of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Obviously, Prophet Muhammad, you're speaking to an English audience. I'm saying Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam because you guys understand, but also bear in mind the language of who you're speaking to. Don't start using Arabic terms. You can say Prophet Muhammad. Say something that they'll understand. The point is to get them to understand, right? So I believe in the messengership of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of God be upon him, and these are the teachings. This is contained within the teachings, and that's why I follow it, because ultimately I want to have salvation hereafter. I believe, after my passing, that there will be another life to come, and your success is ultimately determined by how well you adhere to the teachings in this world, and that will lead to success or failure in the hereafter. And I want to be among the successful, however you want to explain it. But the point is, then once you go through this process, you're calling the person, regardless of how the question came to you. Why do you pray? Why do you fast? Whatever have you. You can, for the most part, give the same answer, which is to call someone to Islam, and what you're trying to do is get them to understand the Islamic position, why the Islamic position as a whole makes more sense than any other position. And then within the Islamic position, all of these questions then get answered. Why do you pray? Because God says so. Why do you fast? Because God says so. Why this? Why do you not eat pork? Because God says so. Yada, yada, yada. And all of the questions ultimately go away. You don't have to answer them, every single one, individual one. So not only do the questions that the person came with get answered, but also all the other ones that they didn't think about get answered. And maybe, now you're calling the person to Islam, and now they can start thinking more about their worldview and the state of their existence and the reason for existing, the reason for creation, rather than just having, that narrow thing of, well, why this one particular thing? So there are different approach. Well, I say the different approaches. They're essentially the same approach. They're just called different things. So it's called GoRap, which was coined by IERA, which stands for God, Oneness, Revelation, and Prophethood, or Grades, which was I think it was a Myriad Foundation in Manchester here in the UK, which is God, Revelation, Agents, which is Prophet and Messenger, Death, Eternality, and Salvation. I prefer the Grades approach. They're quite similar. Ultimately, you start off with calling the person to recognize that there is a creator, there's a divine reality, that, so GoRap adds in the oneness, which is the attributes, which again you can cover inside of God with Grades, that there is revelation and there is messengers. Then actually what Grades focus a little bit more on is to focus on then the death and eternality, that at the end of the day, this conversation that we're having, between me and you, that it's not, we're not having this conversation in some abstract concept inside of a vacuum, whatever have you. There's a very, very real consequence to this conversation, which is that, at the end of the day, you are going to pass away. We're all going to pass away. And the choices that you make in terms of the lifestyle that you choose to follow is going to ultimately govern your success or, failure in the life to come. And this conversation could be the conversation that changes that awakens you to the test that there is to come. So this is not like an abstract conversation as to, okay, which is better, BMW or Mercedes, where ultimately the answer doesn't matter. This conversation is a conversation that is not only going to change your life, but could very well change your afterlife as well, for eternality, essentially. And ultimately, everybody wants salvation, right? Nobody wants to go to destruction. Literally, nobody wants to go to destruction. So remember the slides again from the second session where we discussed when people see the hellfire being brought forth on Yom Al-Qiyamah, on the Day of Judgment. And remember how we described it, which is that not like it's a pool or a lake or something like that being dragged, but rather just imagine it as a raging beast, a mighty walrus or a horse or something even scarier than that just the sheer sight of it would make your skin fall off in just sheer shock. That it's something that is raging, that it wants to consume all of humanity, and that it has 70,000 hooks on it like a bridle, and on each one you have 70,000 angels that are literally just trying to hold it down, hold it under control, because if they let go, then it will literally just destroy everything. That's what's going to be brought forth on Yom Al-Qiyamah. So, on that day, no one's going to want to go willingly to it, right? But the people right now are willingly running towards the fire. This is why Rasulullah mentioned in the hadith that he is like one who is trying to stop the people, like moths entering a flame, and he's just there trying to say, swat them back, saying, stay back, yet everybody is rushing towards the fire. We all want salvation, right? The problem is, at that point, it'll be way too late. We need to know about it now, so that's why we're having this conversation now. Okay, so ultimately the technique of having that conversation is to call people to the purity and the rationality of Islam, and also sell, this is an important point as well, sell the benefits, not the features, right? So rather than, how do we say, so people sell just the features of Islam, like, okay, so you have to pray and you have to do this, and make it very, very dry and abstract. That, okay, people don't come into Islam because, oh, you have to do this ritualistic thing. People come into it because there's some kind of a benefit for them. That, okay, by virtue of the ritualistic prayer, the salah, that you can make that connection to your Lord, right? You can have that connection. You can have that tranquility. That people say that they find peace in prayer. It's like, well, okay, fine. And some people say, well, I pray to God, all day long, right? Non-Muslims. Like, really, do you like just in the back of your mind, is that a prayer? No, when we're talking about prayer, we're talking about actually, when we, as say Muslims, talking about prayer, we're talking about actually taking active steps that you'll wash your face, you'll wash yourself, you'll wear clean clothing, you'll stand up in congregation, you'll start, reciting from the Quran out loud, you'll concentrate and think about your supplications or whatever have you. And that's just doing one. And we have to do that 5 times a day. We'll arise from our sleep to do that for our Fajr prayer. We will break, whatever topic or activity we're engaged with to make sure that we attend the prayer in its due time, for Maghrib, for Isha, for example. We will we will fast every single day in the month of Ramadan, so we will actively go out and do things, right? And that's what gives us that tranquility and that security. It's not just an abstract thing of, oh, well, I pray to God in my heart. So what you need to be doing is basically look, this is what Islam will do for you, right? This is the benefit of it. Ultimately, you will have a life of purpose. Okay, so again, I don't want to give you like all the different kinds of speeches because we've got a lot to get through, but ultimately also the way that you explain this is going to be different depending on who you're talking to. So again, you've got to understand who you're talking to and engage with that person who you're talking to find out what really makes them tick, what really is it that they're actually looking for, and let them know how Islam will benefit them in that sense. Okay, so what about like regular street dawah or whatever have you, or how do you start off a conversation? Okay, so again, there's a few different things that you have to be aware of. So starting off a conversation is quite situational, right? The way that you would start off a conversation is completely different depending on whether you approached an individual or whether somebody approached you. It depends on obviously why they approached you. Are you in a quiet environment, noisy environment? I mean, you can read all of this, right? So again, think about the situation they're in. There's not like a one size fits all solution here. You've got to basically be aware and read the room, so to speak, read the situation around you and be able to adapt to what works best in this sense. You've got to also be thinking like, put yourself in the shoes of the other person. And this is the important thing. Put yourself in the shoes of the other person and just think about what would they appreciate. Don't project your own wants and desires upon them and give them what you think sorry, not what you think, what you believe that they should be appreciating, but rather put yourself in a situation and think what they actually would appreciate. Okay, so don't be like a holier than thou kind of individual. You've got to basically take the people as they come. Build a rapport with people. Okay, so commonality, it helps to build acquaintances. So you can talk to someone and say, hey, I like your shoes, I got the same shoes, or I don't know why I picked shoes, but whatever, just try and just have a conversation with someone. So actually, do you know what? I need to put a slide in here because one of the techniques, it's not in one of these slides, but one of the best techniques that we ever used, I was going to say we came up with, because we didn't come up with, we totally stole it from Myriad Foundation. Myriad Foundation, mashallah, nothing but praise for them. So they came up with this idea of having have your say. It's basically you have this little stall, and that basically there with questionnaires, which some fairly basic questions about Islam. Do you know what Islam means? What do Muslims, who do Muslims worship, and blah blah. Very very simple basic questions, and there's some open-ended questions there as well. Like if you met a Muslim, what question would you like to ask a Muslim or whatever have you? Okay, very very open-ended questions, and the way that you approach someone is on the guise of well, basically you're taking a survey, right? So you say, look, do you mind answering a few questions, whatever have you, and you basically just go through the questionnaire, and I'll explain a little bit more how we how that's actually used with regards to this. But the point being that an easy way to get people involved is, if you're doing that out in the city center, you can just be walking around. You out shopping with the family. Generally you'll see, the women have gone into the shops or whatever have you. The husband is usually standing outside, just bored at this point. So you say, shopping with the family or whatever have you. Just say something, build rapport. Just don't go straight into it. You have to try and build that connection with people. That's what I'm trying to get to. So build that connection with people, and make sure that you're trying to be as open as possible and as welcoming as possible as well, right? So again, emotional mirroring as well. So if someone is really happy and excited or whatever have you, maybe they're on their way to see a game or a match or whatever have you. We have a stadium here in our city center, so we often find game fans, football, rugby, whatever have you, game fans on match days. um so you don't want to approach them, oh, excuse me, and blah blah, and have a very meek attitude. Try and match what they're doing. Also, maybe if someone is a little bit hostile and angry, you'll know, because they're going to cross their arms. What you can do is, this is a subconscious thing that human beings do. If you cross your arms to begin with as well, so you're mirroring, what you can actually then do is, after a minute or so, open your arms up, put your hands in your pocket, whatever have you, and that kind of subconsciously indicates that you're non-threatening, you're being non-aggressive, you're open for conversation, you're basically eliminating barriers. And you'll find that more often than not, they'll actually mirror that with you, and their attitude will follow their physical posture. So again, be aware of how you're engaging with people, and always stay calm. You don't need to start shouting, whatever have you. If someone doesn't like what you have to say, always not getting it, either improve your argument, basically improve your manner of engagement. Don't increase your voice. You don't need to do that. Okay. um Now, so in terms of they're starting off a conversation, you can introduce the concept of Islam. So a technique I used to do, and I actually found quite good success with this. This is before we started doing the have you say thing, which I'll explain now as well. Is to just ask people, listen, are you a Muslim? And they'd say no. I say, why not? So again, that was a very quick, oh, well, I don't know. I don't know anything about it. Oh, you don't? Okay, fine. Would you like to know? Can I explain to you a little bit and whatever have you? Sometimes they'll say yes, sometimes they'll say no. Again, it's the way that you engage with people, it's different depending on different societies and situations, right? So here in the UK particularly, we have a lot of people that are very, very much into scientism and atheism, whatnot have you. So the way that I would approach them is probably different to how I would approach them in America, where I understand people to be a lot more, theologically aware, that they would probably be more likely Christians or whatever have you, and the same in Africa, South Africa as well, or Southern Africa. Where people are very, very much, theological atheism doesn't have really a foothold there at all. So the way that you engage with people, it's different depending on who you're talking to. You've got to basically try and understand, and find the way that works best for them. Now, very, very important point. Okay, this is very, very important. Is that you have to gain buy-in to the conversation. So if you're going to have a conversation with someone, right, you have to gain buy-in, and your first buy-in is time. Okay, so ask the person. By the way, there's obviously I haven't listed this here, but ask the person their name, and how are they doing, and are they local, whatever have you. That's part of building rapport. The important thing, ask them, do they have the time for this? Now, the reason for that is out of sincerity. So how much time have you got to play with. You're being sensitive to their availability as well. So rather than just going into it and going into a long speech, that could be a half an hour long, whatever have you, ask them. You're just being polite and just saying, listen, have you got some time to listen to me? And if they say yeah, just ask, have you got 2 minutes? Have you got 5 minutes? Give yourself a time limit, make it something reasonable. But at least then because that person has committed, that more often than not, because they've said, yeah, I'll give you, 2 minutes, I'll give you 5 minutes, that they will actually now, because they've agreed to do it, they will actually give you that time. So you've kind of got some time now to play with it more often than not. Okay, so it gives you an idea of how much time you've got to play with. I mean, it's just polite, and the ones that say no, not to waste time with those people, basically. So it's a good thing to make sure that you have all around. And also, one thing that you want to also be aware of, you may not necessarily want to bring it up directly, but maybe in some indirect way, is reason. That you want to basically have a discussion that's based on reason, on rational principles, and say, obviously we want, just say it like, listen, we want something that makes sense. We want to make sense of our world. We want something that we can understand, right, rather than something flitty. So what you're trying to do is get the person to subscribe to some kind of a reason or evidence-based discussion, so that when you're going through the motions of explaining, this is why we believe that there's a creator, or whatever have you, when they start becoming unreasonable, then at least you can say, well, I thought we were just going to have a reasonable or rational based discussion, but if you want to believe in something that just can't be supported, that's your call. Because at least then what you're doing is you're subconsciously raising that intellectual barrier, the intellectual price tag to winning the discussion, right? From an argumentation perspective, you're doing that subliminally. But you also kind of want to call them out and say, look, you're being unreasonable now. In terms of what you're believing, in terms of what you're saying, in terms of what the position that you're holding, you're being unreasonable. Now, nobody, unless they're trolling, nobody likes to have their core worldview as a position of unreasonability. So at least that's a mechanism of planting the seed, that if you've managed to expose to them and show them that, look, what I'm trying to say makes sense, and you're being unreasonable about this now because of X, Y, and Z. Don't just arbitrarily accuse them. Give a solid, coherent reasoning and understanding that, look, this is an unreasonable position to take, and don't and attack the idea, not the person. So don't say like you're being unreasonable, but this idea that you're holding, that's not a reasonable position to hold because of X, Y, Z, whatever have you. At least then it's now planting a seed in their subconscious that even after the conversation, they may be thinking that, what, why is it that the worldview that I have, the way I'm thinking, doesn't actually make sense? That other person I was speaking to, theirs does make sense. So are they in the right? Am I in the wrong? So those kinds of seeds actually they do work. So let me just explain how the have your say stall works. So we have the questionnaires. One of the questions is, if you what question would you like to ask of a Muslim? Open-ended question. So they'll basically give the question, and you do that. You take their details, whatever have you. So that's the questionnaire done. You can start off again with this, like, listen, have you got 2 minutes just to do this questionnaire? Or, 1 minute, and you can even show them the questionnaire. It's literally got 5 questions on it. Blah blah blah. We're just doing a survey, and because people can see that there's only literally a limited number of questions, and you've said to them it'll take 1 minute, 2 minutes, most people will give you that. So you can just basically go into that, yada 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 yada. So now, depending on the questions that you've picked for your questionnaire, obviously now you've got a very big brief background about this person, right? That you can use to understand, okay, which way do I want to go with them? Particularly the question of, what question would you like to ask a Muslim? So once you've done that questionnaire, thank you very much, Fulan, for your time. By the way, if you want to know the answer to this question, I can explain this answer to your question now. Assalamu alaikum. Oh, you say assalamu alaikum to him. So you can say to them, oh, you asked this question. I can give you the answer to this now. Now, because you're answering a question directly that they want to know the answer to, now they're more intrigued. So they might have said, what question do you want to ask of a Muslim? Why are the men and women treated differently, or whatever have you, right? So you can say, okay, you wanted to know this question. If you want, I can explain. If you've got a few more minutes, I can give you the explanation to this now. And I don't believe I've ever had a situation where they've actually said, no, I don't want to know the answer. They pretty much said, that's the question I want to know. So, okay, yeah, fine, give it to me. And that's you're in. Then you can basically now take that segue to go into Go Rap or grades or whatever have you, to then bring the answer around to whatever it is that you want. And with this, when we started using this as well, the effectiveness of this was indescribable as compared to any other approach that we had used. So I would very, very strongly recommend using this approach over and above anything else. We've been doing, the regular Dawah tables, for years, and you might have a few conversations a day, whereas with this, it was almost like every conversation that you had was a really in-depth, meaningful conversation. So I would very, very strongly recommend this kind of a mechanism. But that's the basic general overview of starting off a conversation. So again, it's very situational, depending on people whom you're dealing with. Again, don't forget to remember your manners. We're just basically going over lessons here that we learned from the first 2 sessions, but these are the characteristics, the traits that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam exhibited when he was talking to potential, or talking to people who are looking at Islam, face the person that you're talking to with your whole body, your full attention, yada yada yada. I'm not going to read all this out because obviously, I'm not going to insult you guys. You guys can read. I just want to see if there's anything there that needs further explanation. So listen to what they're saying. This is a very, very important one. Listen to what they're saying and turn off your radio. So too often, people will not listen to what the person is actually engaged with, and what they'll do is they'll just switch off, let the person go on their own rant or discussion, whatever have you, and then they'll answer what they think the person asked rather than what the person actually asked, whatever have you. Like, I've seen a number of instances where people have said, well, I'm Christian and blah 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 blah, and the duat is literally just switched off, right? And then when the person stopped talking, then the da'i basically switched back on and says, right, okay, now to challenge Christianity, Jesus was this and blah 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 blah, completely eliminating the fact that had they listened properly, the person said, yeah, he's Christian, or the Christian from a Christian background, but they don't actually believe anymore, they're non-practicing or whatever have you. So as far as belief goes, they're more agnostic or atheistic or whatever have you, and they're quite open. Yet the da'i has just gone into this whole tirade against Christianity, which has got nothing to do with anything at this point. Does that make sense? So very, very important. Listen to what the person is telling you, because they'll actually tell you the keys to how to reach them if you learn to listen properly enough. Okay, that's a very, very important one. Tell you dawah for them based on their views, yet don't recite and memorize speech. So yeah, and this comes again with practice. Okay, acknowledge the questions. This is a very important one as well. And you'll see Dr. Zakir Naik does this, all the time. So whenever someone asks a question, acknowledge the question. Say, right, okay, and a good way is just to repeat the question back to them. Say, okay, so if I understand what you're asking is X, Y, and Z. So that does two things. Number one, it makes sure that you've understood what they're actually asking properly, that there's been no confusion there. And number two, it indicates to them that you've actually heard them. Because what you often find is, if you don't do this, because you're going to want to go and bring them back to Islam as a whole, you'll find that the person is like, yeah, but I was just asking you about this. And you get into this little bit of a conflict where they don't think that you're answering the question that they want. Whereas if you've answered their question, if you repeated their question back to them and said, look, this is what you're asking, right? Now that they've had confirmation that you've understood their question, now they're willing to let you have a little bit of rope to go around a bit, because they know that you've got the question that they were actually getting to. Does that make sense? So it's a very, very strong and powerful technique to repeat the question back to them for both reasons. Win the hearts, not minds, yet. Because people will buy into your personality. So again, don't come up with, I see some du'at that literally when they want to talk to someone, right, I'm going to bring this argument, I'm going to bring that argument. Yani, dawah is not an intellectual exercise for the most part. It's more about, like I said, in the very, very first session, that 80-90% plus of your effectiveness as a da'i is not necessarily in what you say, but it's how you say it. It's how you engage with people. It's that connection that you have with people. Okay, so don't be too focused on the knowledge. Yes, you need to have the knowledge, but more so than the knowledge, you also need to have the ability to connect with people. Okay, that's the harder one to do. That's the harder one to do, and that's where the success of this really, really lays. Okay, people will forget what you said, but remember how you made them feel. Okay, so yeah, never ever, never ever make someone feel insulted. Again, don't forget in the slide that we did on dawah, if no one's going to come and accept what you are offering if by the way when you offered it to them you made them feel insulted. Remember the example that we did, I think it was with regards to food, where we said to Fulan, like, Fulan, your house is a mess and your food is awful, why don't you come to my place, we've got way better food than whatever you have, whatever have you. That it's an insult, right? And even if it's something better for the person, they're not going to take it if you've insulted them or made them feel bad in the course of doing it. Does that make sense? So again, it's all about connecting with that person. Okay, and again, stay on topic. Oh, by the way, also close up the conversation if it's not going anywhere. Sometimes you just get people that are just not worth talking to, that they'll just go round and round and round. Again, your objective, we did this slide, I think it was in the second session, is to convey the message. It's not to convince a person. So if you have done what you believe is your best in conveying the message to a person, and you feel that there's no traction, that this person really is not is not getting it, or is deliberately trying to, to avoid the issue or whatever have you, you can just call it a day. Lakum dinukum waliya din. Like, to you is your way, and to you is your religion, and to us is ours. So don't feel that you have to convince a person. You just have to convey the message. If you've conveyed the message, khalas, then you're done. That's as much as you need to. So again, you have that out. That's not a problem. And it comes down to time management as well. You can't spend all day on a troll, for example. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Right. Now, so we have this ayah from Surah Al-Dhariyat, that this is ultimately the reason for our creation, that we were created to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? And the way that you could explain this to someone, Islam being the rational choice, that we've been given a choice, basically. So remember, this is more the grades thing with regards to salvation. I think we discussed this a little bit more. We discussed this earlier already, that man has been given the choice that we can either submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and gain the eternal reward, or we can submit to other than Allah, basically our own desires or whatever have you, and deny our share in the hereafter. That's basically what the choice is that you're trying to convey to a person. That ultimately, regardless of what question you came with, regardless of what worldview you had, this is basically the choice that mankind has been offered, and this is what you're trying to explain. Okay, and let them make that choice. Now, in terms of asking for the shahada as well, so we see this, du'at have spent, du'at are very, very, very eager to encourage people, oh, take your shahada now, take your shahada now. Now, this is something I want to really get across. The shahada, okay, saying la ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, is not a magical spell, for example. Okay, it means something to us as Muslims because we understand what it means. So let's just give it a very rough translation in English as: there is no deity worthy of worship except Allah, and Muhammad, may the peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, is his messenger, is his final messenger. Okay, we understand what that means, and we understand the implications of that. But for someone who doesn't speak Arabic or has no idea what's going on, it literally means nothing to them. It's gobbledygook. And just by them uttering gobbledygook with no understanding, no comprehension of what's going on, what weight do you think that carries? Right? It's literally little more than gobbledygook. If they don't know who Allah, how can you say the shahada? Right? If you don't know who Allah is, how can you affirm and testify that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the messenger of God if you don't even know who he is? Right? If you even deny his existence, right? So it's not just a magical get out of jail free card. Oh, I've just said it once arbitrarily. I've never lived by it. I didn't even understand what it is, right? The shahada is basically a declaration of the tongue that follows something in the heart, that really you should be asking someone for the shahada once they've understood the gravity of what it is that they're about to get. Don't just say, don't be the type of person that says, right, okay, I've just proven this kalam cosmological argument to you, blah, 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 blah. Do you yield? Yes, we yield. Okay, now say the shahada, right? It doesn't work like that. Okay, again, I can't remember if I mentioned this in this session or not, but I was engaged with an organization here in the UK that basically dealt with reverts or whatever have you. So they had literally, a lot of reverts on their books, like with thousands. And I had this corroborated by a couple of people, but in terms of how many of those individuals came to Islam from a dawah table, the answer was zero. None. Because when you engage with, very short, fast discussion, take your shahada there and then, as fast as they came into Islam is as fast as they leave. The people who come into Islam and stay in Islam are the ones that you built it up for them slowly, where they understood what they were subscribing to, and basically the iman is, you grow the iman. It just gets stronger and stronger over a period of time. And these are the Muslims that we want. Don't look for an instant thing and say, oh, okay, this person took a shahada today, and then at the end of the voice, like, how many did you get? I got, I can imagine the scene like in Lord of the Rings, in Return of the King, where Legolas and Gimli are like, how many people did they defeat? It's like, how many shahadas did you get today? It doesn't work like that. Stop doing that. Okay, it doesn't work like that. So, ask for them to ask for, you can ask for the shahada, no problem, so long as they understood what their talking about. And again, don't, this is the other thing that we do. We as Muslims, we're very used to using fire and brimstone. If you don't take shahada, you're going to burn in hellfire, and you're going to have, if you want to drink something, you're going to be given pus that is so hot that it will toast your tongue, and your brain will be boiling, and blah 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 blah. Like, okay, fine, but give some beautiful descriptions of Jannah as well. Give them the descriptions of, you're going to have, a palace on top of a high hill that you're going to be able to see all the land around you that will belong to you. You will have trees made out of gold and silver that will, bear all different kinds of fruit that will bend over and give you whatever that it is that you want. Just by desiring it, they will give it to you. And the fruit, every single bite that you taste, it will taste sweeter and better than the last bite. And it will just, rather than the fruits of this world where you just get used to it and get bored of it, the fruits of Jannah, they'll just get better and better. Every single bite will get more and more sweet. That the trees will give you comfort and shade. That give beautiful descriptions, things that, this is going to be your abode for eternity, for all time, right? If you accept Islam, don't worry about whatever happened before. The acceptance of Islam, the recognition that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah, God Almighty, is your Lord, that wipes your claim. You literally start off sinless. In fact, not even sinless, that the fact that all of the things that you have done or may have done, whatever have you, actually get converted from sins and put onto your scale. So you start off with a head start, basically. You're off running. And also, don't be like the person, who didn't submit to Allah, and then when he sees the reality of the Day of Judgment, he says, "Oh God, please send me back to the world. Send me back to the world. Now that I've seen, I will worship you. I will give in charity. I will give this, that, and that." It's too late. Then it's too. This is the time to make the choice now, and not even that, right? Also, don't be so oppressive that someone, you have to give up your drink and straight away and whatever have you. Okay, look, yes, right, as far as Islam goes, yes, these, alcohol and whatever have you, is still a sin, but recognize that it is way, way better for an individual to accept Islam and become a sinful Muslim, someone who believes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and believes in Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but still has vices, still has traits from their existing life that will take time to fade away. It is better for them to do that rather than to say, oh, well, I can't give up alcohol right here, right now, so I'm just not going to enter Islam altogether. Okay? It's a slow process. Don't expect instant results. That's your fault for expecting a failure. This was never the methodology of Rasulullah or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because even the prohibition of alcohol came down into stages. And this was in stages for people who were around Rasulullah, like their iman was on an all-time high, something that we can't even hope to get close to. So if even they were given the concession of having, prohibition coming down in stages, who are we to say, no, you've got to do it right here, right now? Like, be gentle, be soft on the people. Ultimately, you want them to get to the end goal of, submission, which is what Islam actually is, right? You don't want to basically make that door so hard. You want to make the halal easier than the haram. Unfortunately, we go, we see a number of du'at that become holier than thou, that and make the halal make the haram easier than the halal. It's no wonder, people are struggling, okay? And then not even just that. Okay, so now once they've taken the shahada, now what? Now they're like a newborn baby. Now you've got to look after them. So also you've got to have a plan or a strategy in place now that, okay, this person that has accepted Islam, what am I going to do with them? What are we going to do? Okay, that you've got to basically look after them now. You've got to give them the resources. You've got to take them to the masjid. You've got to teach them how to pray, yada, yada, yada. Okay, right. Also recognize that, with regards to the trolls, there will always be individuals that will deny the truth. Okay, there's always going to be, at the end of the day, Jahannam was created to be filled, so there are always going to be people that's just going to deny it. For example, Abu Jahl, for example, the Prophet's uncle, literally saw the moon split. They asked for a miracle, they saw the moon split, and rather than accepting it as a miracle, they basically said this is just some magic in our eyes. Nuh alayhi salam's son, right? So don't forget, at this point in time, Nuh alayhi salam, Noah, has been given da'wah for 950 years, for a long time, okay? His son, who else knows Noah as close as his son does? His son decided not to board the ship and thought he could just outrun the flood from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like where are you even coming with this kind of idea, right? And Fir'aun seeing the amount of, different miracles that were happening in front of him, the different calamities that, Musa alayhi salam told him that this is going to happen. He saw it, and then he submitted. Then he went back, and he went round and round and round again, like. And he's still going on about that he is the one who's God, even though he's basically been destroyed by all of these plagues that were sent, right? You're going to have people that just don't submit. So again, remember, the idea is, or the maxim is, convey the message. It's not your job to convince the person. Okay. And finally, some other techniques that you can use. So it's not always just a case of, just engaging in street dawah or whatever have you. Bear in mind, the slides and everything like that were constructed actually for dawah training for people who are actually going out and doing street dawah, as it was, quite a popular thing to do about 10 years or so ago. So probably, given COVID times and things like that, our techniques might need to be updated. But yeah, do lectures, reminders, open discussions, to have an opportunity to meet a Muslim. In fact, actually, I saw a picture on social media a few days ago, and I should actually have copied it and put it, of a Dawah cafe, where the owners were Muslims, and if you wanted to, if you sat and listened to an explanation of Islam, you can have your tea and coffee for free. Give opportunities for people to come and learn, right? Write for social media, get involved, create your own videos, distribution of material, performing acts of ibadah openly, praying openly. So have a conversation, right? So my favorite one, you saw that picture on Instagram. I need to find that one. Have a conversation with a friend. Now, okay, this is a very, very powerful technique. Okay, this is a passive dawah. Okay, so very rarely people will, I say very rarely, so it's difficult, if you go up to 100 people and say, listen, can I talk to you about Islam, or particularly at that point in time, this is when Islamophobia was obviously rife, it was difficult to get people to listen. So outside of the have your say thing, it was difficult to have a conversation. Your hit rate, your success rate for having people listen to you was actually very low. So maybe out of 100 people that you spoke to, maybe 5 people would listen to you. So we developed a completely separate technique, which was basically passive dawah, which is where we recognize that people love to eavesdrop, and people can't help but eavesdrop in certain situations. So what we would do is, so for example, you have an elevator pitch, right? So when we were going into a shopping center, if we were to enter into an elevator, we know that everybody in the elevator is trapped with us for at least 10 to 20 seconds, right? Everyone is trapped. So if you can create a pitch for Islam in 10 to 20 seconds, everybody's going to be listening to that, right? So what we would do is we would enter in an elevator, like, going to the car park, whatever have you, elevator, lift, whatever have you. And so my friend would say to me, right, okay, so what were you saying to Fulan? Obviously this is a staged discussion. It's completely staged. It's not a real question. He knows, we both know what we're doing. That's another good thing as well. Find yourself a dawah partner that knows what you're doing. So we would just enter in. He would just say to me, oh, what were you saying to Fulan? And literally I would just say, oh, well, I was telling him, listen, right, Islam obviously makes sense because, look, if you consider the state of reality had to come from somewhere. So it either came from absolutely nothing, but if there was nothing, then nothing would exist. So it had to have come from something. And that's what we believe is ultimately the creator of reality that then sent us a message, which is the Quran, because fundamentally, the Quran is preserved and it exhibits every single characteristic of what you would actually define as a miracle if you observe it. So for these two reasons, we believe in Islam, and that's why we do X, Y, and Z. Okay, so that's the first time I've actually did that in years, so that probably wasn't very good. But obviously with practice, you can streamline it and just come up to a banging explanation. Boom! In 20 seconds, you've just basically planted a whole bunch of seeds. Yeah. So yes, he did. He's done that as well, but not at the time when we were doing it. This is coming back years and years and years. But yeah, alhamdulillah, it's like I said. Okay, so when I say we came up with it, what I mean is that it's an idea that occurred to us, and obviously, good ideas will occur to many people as well. So I don't claim exclusivity of this idea, but yeah, it's another time we did this, we in a takeaway. So we went into the takeaway, and while we were waiting for our food, we had a much longer conversation then as well. And people sitting in the takeaway actually, we were observing, actually stopped their own conversations to listen into what we were talking. So my friend was basically just going back and forth. Oh, what did you say? And I say one thing, and then he talked about, So I'll basically give like a little part of the story, and he'd just be prompting me. So for any other third party listener, we were actually having a back and forth conversation. But ultimately, he was basically giving me we were basically just giving dawah to people who were listening in, but without them realizing that actually they were our true audience, that they thought that they were just eavesdropping. Okay, so that again is another technique. You're just trying to plant seeds. Research versus Baraka fumes. This is an idea. This is something that I got completely from Sheikh Kamal al-Makki. I assume you're talking about Sheikh Kamal al-Makki here when you said Sheikh Kamal. So this is something we got completely from Sheikh Kamal al-Makki, which is that do your research in terms of what works. And don't just assume that just because something has some vaguely Islamic connection that there's going to be barakah in it, because at the end that's what you would call barakah fumes, right? That's what he termed as barakah fumes, that just because something is vaguely Islamic that it's going to work. No, still you have to do your research. You have to find out, does this work, does that work, do some trials, do some tests, get some statistics together, whatever have you. Actually do some actual research and planning, and work it out, which is going to be way more effective. This way more effective than just arbitrarily doing anything that you want and just assuming because it's vaguely Islamic that it's going to have barakah in it. Okay, so that was pretty much all I have for regards to this section. So hopefully, basically, if you've taken all these ideas on board, and of course it's gonna take some practice and some time to get skilled with it. Don't expect to be an expert straight away, but so long as you keep these ideas in mind, inshallah, you should be equipped and be able to go out now and to explain the message of Islam with some degree of confidence, in being able to engage with people with a variety of different situations, wherever have you, inshallah, and have some kind of an expert discussion. So before we move on to the next section, are there any questions on this? I'll give you guys a second if there's any questions on this.